Had to ask God for his mercy and grace. I'm so sorry.
What if one of the biggest names in music had a secret world hidden beneath his mansion, real tunnels, real rooms, and real victims? For years, there were whispers about Diddy's freak-offs, masked women, and private parties that crossed every imaginable line. Most dismissed it as tabloid noise. But on day 5 of the federal trial, Cassie Ventura stepped into the courtroom and under oath confirmed what many feared. The rumors were real, and worse than anyone imagined. She didn't flinch when asked about the tunnel. She said yes. She had been inside. Beneath the luxury and fame was something far darker. A hidden door, a staircase, and a series of rooms that she described in chilling detail, rooms designed not for pleasure, but for control, submission, and silence. What she saw down there wasn't fantasy. It was a system organized, rehearsed, and documented. This isn't a conspiracy theory anymore. It's testimony. Cassie's account may be the key to unraveling one of the most tightly guarded secrets in the entertainment industry, and it's forcing the world to ask, how far does the rabbit hole go when power protects the predator? What happens when silence breaks under oath? The courtroom had been tense from the moment the doors opened. Everyone knew Cassie Ventura was returning to the stand, but no one expected what would happen next. The defense attorney, calm but calculated, skipped the usual questions about her relationship with Sean Diddy Combs and went straight to something that caught everyone off guard. "Miss Ventura," he asked, "have you ever been beneath the property, inside the tunnel?" There was a pause. Even the sound of scribbling pens and quiet breathing seemed to freeze. The prosecution immediately objected, calling the question irrelevant and speculative, but the judge allowed it. All eyes turned to Cassie. She took a deep breath and said one word that changed everything. Yes, with that, years of online speculation, Reddit threads, blog posts, anonymous tips, suddenly had a voice behind them. Not a conspiracy theorist or distant witness, Cassie under oath. In a federal courtroom, she began to describe what she saw. A disguised entrance behind thick foliage by the pool, a slope hidden beneath the landscaping, a hatch beneath the leaves, and beneath that hatch, concrete steps, steel doors, and silence. Cold, artificial silence. The kind that doesn't feel like it belongs in a house. Everyone leaned in as she continued. This wasn't some panic room or storage space. It was something else, something designed, built hidden, and it wasn't empty. Cassie's voice remained steady, but the words coming out left the courtroom in stunned silence. She described stepping inside the tunnel, guided only by the soft hum of low artificial lights embedded in the ceiling. The walls were smooth, not like a makeshift basement or unfinished space. This was deliberate construction, insulated, ventilated, and secure. It felt more like a bunker than part of a luxury mansion. I said the air changed the moment the door sealed shut behind her. Cooler, recycled. There was no outside noise, no light from the world above. Just that long corridor stretching ahead, slightly sloped downward, ending in another door. She hesitated then. That's when I realized, she told the court, this wasn't just some eccentric design feature, it was meant to hide people or things. Inside the second chamber, she recalled seeing surveillance monitors, shelves of hard drives, filing cabinets locked with combination dials. But more disturbing were the personal effects: women's clothing, phones, wallets, none of them hers. She noticed a faint buzzing sound from behind a wall, like power feeding into something mechanical. When asked why she had never spoken about it before, her answer was chilling, because he told me if I ever did, I'd disappear, and no one would even know where to start looking. That line alone shifted the energy of the entire case. The tunnel wasn't just some bizarre rumor anymore, it was real, and Cassie's testimony brought it to life. The prosecution looked shaken. The judge asked for recess, and online the floodgates opened. Former staff began contacting journalists anonymously. Videos resurfaced, showing vague blueprints of the property. A leaked zoning map hinted at underground utility extensions that were never publicly disclosed. Some called it a private archive. Others said it was a holding area. But everyone agreed this wasn't just wealth-fueled paranoia. This was purposeful, thought out, hidden in plain sight beneath the mansion of one of the most powerful men in music. The public began to wonder what else had gone unnoticed and if the tunnel was just the beginning. Cassie's words didn't just describe a structure, they cracked open a narrative that had been tightly sealed for over a decade, and now no one could look away. The blueprints weren't supposed to exist, at least not the ones that surfaced online 2 days after Cassie's testimony. They were grainy scans of architectural draft sections labeled Service Corridor Emergency Chamber and the more chilling Isolation Room 3B. The layout was bizarre, a network of narrow hallways branching out beneath the estate, like veins, some leading to sealed rooms with no other point of entry or exit. At first, people assumed the images were fake, but a former contractor came forward anonymously confirming he had worked on the lower levels of the mansion under strict NDAs and armed security. We weren't allowed to bring phones. He said every material delivery was tracked, and we only saw partial designs. Nobody had the full picture, literally. That was the point. He described false walls, rotating doors, even hidden stairwells tucked behind bookshelves. Most of the rooms, he claimed, were soundproof. A few had locks on the outside. The mansion, already known for its scale and luxury, began to morph in the public imagination. It was no longer just a symbol of excess. It was a fortress, a labyrinth, a private world designed for absolute control. One hallway, according to the leaked plans, stretched under the backyard pool and ended near what appeared to be a steel vault. Another led to a tunnel that connected to a guest house, 2 properties. Overland owned by a shell company with links to offshore accounts. A real estate reporter dug into permits and found that certain inspections had been waived due to private federal security agreements, a term so rare it raised more questions than answers. More testimonies followed. A former housekeeper recalled being told never to step on the elevator's B3 level. Another described hearing music from underground in the middle of the night beats, with no lyrics, as if someone were testing tracks. But the most unsettling account came from a caterer hired for a New Year's party years prior. At the end of the night, a girl came up from the basement. He said, "She looked confused, like she didn't know where she was. Security surrounded her fast and took her back down. I never saw her again." These were no longer isolated allegations. The maze beneath the mansion had become the story, its purpose, the question no one could yet answer. Was it built for secrecy, for entertainment, for containment? And still the man at the center of it all remained silent. His lawyers issued blanket denials. His publicists spun it as a distorted narrative fueled by jealousy and fame chasing. But no one could explain the architecture. No one could deny the maps. And no one had yet offered a single reason for why a music mogul needed a multi-room underground labyrinth that even his guests didn't know existed. The mansion wasn't just hiding something. It had been built to. They weren't called parties, not officially. The staff called them freak-offs, a nickname whispered behind closed doors coined after one of the night guards said it felt like a contest to out-weird the last one. They were invitingly off the books and completely disconnected from the artist's public events. No cameras, no press, no stories shared on social media. Phones were surrendered at the door, and guests were often blindfolded on arrival, driven in blacked-out vans from pre-arranged meeting points to the mansion. Descriptions from insiders were inconsistent, maybe intentionally. So one former DJ who played the early events said it started tame experimental music sessions, themed fashion light drugs. But by the 5th or 6th gathering, he said the vibe shifted. People stopped dressing for fun and started dressing to disturb. He recalled masks, leather eyes painted black. Some came as animals, some came half-naked, some in full-on ceremonial robes. It felt like performance art until it didn't. One room was always locked, marked. With a red light above the door, people spoke of it as the inner circle, a place only the artists closest could enter. Those who came out were usually silent, pale, or in some cases, never seen again in those circles. Rumors swirled of strange rituals, of loud rhythmic sounds that didn't match the music upstairs, of screams mistaken for theatrics. A bartender remembered serving drinks to a man with dried blood on his knuckles who claimed he'd just won the basement round. At least 2 women came forward anonymously in court documents, stating they had been taken to the mansion under the impression they were auditioning for music videos, only to find themselves at one of these events. One described being led through a narrow hallway, into a circular room with mirrored walls, and asked to perform vulnerability. Another said she was given a drink, blacked out, and woke up in a different building entirely. Her clothes folded beside her, and a note that read, "Thank you for your energy." The freak-offs became part of the case file once multiple accounts aligned. Attorneys compiled statements, timestamps, rideshare data, even facial recognition from leaked footage someone had secretly recorded. That footage was never made public, but journalists who claimed to have seen it said it showed a very different kind of gathering, one that blurred the line between consent and coercion, performance and predation. What haunted people most wasn't just what might have happened, but how carefully it was hidden. There were no digital traces, no promotional materials, no receipts. The artist's team ensured plausible deniability. It wasn't a business, it was a subculture built in the shadows of fame, and still, no charges had stuck. Witnesses disappeared or recanted. Evidence was ruled inconclusive, but the stories kept surfacing, one more grotesque than the last. The freak-offs weren't legend anymore. They were a blueprint, a chilling study in how power bends reality until nothing feels real but the fear. She spoke of waking up on the cold marble floor, her skin sticky with sweat, her mouth dry and eyes struggling to focus. The lights were still dim. The music long faded, but the cameras were still rolling. She remembered fragments, a drink, laughter, something metallic, but what haunted her most wasn't what she remembered, it was what she didn't. And then there was the video. She found it by accident on his laptop. He had left the screen open, walked out of the room briefly, and curiosity, or maybe survival instinct, made her look. It was a clip of her. She was moving clearly under the influence of something, eyes glazed over. But following instructions, she didn't remember any of it. When I confronted him, he didn't flinch. She said, "I keep everything for leverage," he told me, like it was a business asset. The drugs weren't just present, they were managed, he decided. When they were taken, how much and by whom? Pills, powders, drinks, sometimes mixed, sometimes introduced slowly over days. She said he tracked her behavior, knew when she would resist and timed the doses accordingly. Her requests to get help, to check into rehab, to talk to a therapist, were met with scoffs. Once she called a treatment center, she never made it to the appointment. He told them I was dramatic, that I was prone to exaggeration, that I'd do anything for attention. They believed him. Why wouldn't they? Everything was recorded. Not just the performances or private gatherings, everything. Surveillance was embedded in the house, small near-invisible cameras in vents behind mirrors in the corners of ceilings. She said she once walked into a room and saw her own face playing back on a wall-mounted monitor from a feed that had been live moments before. It wasn't just paranoia. She insisted he wanted us to know we were being watched, that nothing was secret. Assistants played key roles. They booked appointments, flights, ordered supplies. They greeted guests and offered drinks pre-poured. They were the first to respond when things went wrong. A passed-out guest, a panicking newcomer. They weren't clueless, she said. They just didn't ask questions. Or maybe they didn't want to know the answers. One assistant allegedly had a standing order check each guest's belongings before they left, delete any photos, collect any stray pills. Everything operated with a veneer of exclusivity, and control his staff ensured plausible deniability. Coordinated chaos dressed as artistic freedom. Victims were made to feel complicit. After all, they'd shown up willingly, hadn't they? They signed NDAs, they partied, they smiled in photos. He made. You question your own memories, she said. And by the time you realized what was happening, it was already too late. The control wasn't just physical. It was psychological, systematic. It lived in the silences, in the edited tapes, in the empty apologies, followed by more of the same. There was no need for chains when surveillance did the job just as well. Cassie didn't hesitate when asked about the violence. Her voice was steady, but there was a crack just under the surface, like a window holding back a storm. The abuse, she said, wasn't confined to manipulation or mind games. It was brutal, visible, and undeniable. It wasn't just the threats, she told the court. It was the bruises, the way he'd grab my arm so tight I couldn't lift it the next day. The times I flinched at loud noises because I thought he was behind me. She showed the photosimages that once sat hidden in her phone, never shared with family or friends. Bruises across her ribs, a split lip scratches trailing down her back. She described one incident where a simple argument spiraled into chaos. He kicked me so hard I couldn't breathe. Then he said it was my fault for making him angry. The room listened frozen. This wasn't just emotional torment. It was survival. But one moment seemed to shatter the courtroom entirely. She recalled reading a message from rapper Kid Cudi, a simple text, nothing intimate, just friendly, but it was enough. He lost it. She said, "He accused me of embarrassing him. They were on a boat, docked near Miami. What started as a verbal assault ended with him throwing her overboard. She hit the water hard, lungs gasping as she kicked to the surface. He said I was dead weight, that I was lucky I knew how to swim. Somehow she made it to shore. Wet, shaking barefoot, she could have left then." Many asked why she didn't, but her answer was chilling. Because he had power. She said, and I didn't. He controlled the narrative, the money, the connections. He could make a phone call and end a career. He could smear reputations with a single post. She knew what people would say. Why didn't she leave? But they didn't see what she saw: the closed doors, the silence from those who could have helped, the way people looked away when it got too uncomfortable. Cassie described how the cycle repeated: apologies followed by gifts, tears followed by more violence. There were moments of hope when she thought maybe he'd changed, but they never lasted. Each time she tried to pull away, he'd remind her what he could do, not just to her, but to her family, her friends, anyone who got involved. He didn't need to threaten me out loud, it was all implied. Everyone knew what he was capable of. The courtroom, once buzzing with whispers, sat in heavy silence. Her words cut deeper than any headline. This wasn't drama, it was testimony. A recounting of years spent behind locked gates in a mansion where wealth masked horror, where violence was private and power was the prison. Of all the moments Cassie described, none reverberated like the Intercontinental incident. It wasn't whispered speculation anymore, it was sworn testimony. The courtroom leaned in as she recounted the night that became the most infamous chapter in her story. It was the eve of her movie, premiere, a pivotal moment in her career, something she had worked toward for years. But instead of a celebration, she was dragged into what he called a freak-off. The term, already unsettling, took on a haunting clarity as she explained what it meant. He had orchestrated it before: strangers' voyeurism, drugs, and control masked as pleasure. This time she said no. He didn't accept that. He told me it would help me loosen up. She recalled that I needed to be reminded who I belonged to. She resisted, but he kept pushing. Words turned into manipulation. Eventually exhausted and cornered, she gave in. In a suite at the Intercontinental Hotel, she swallowed a pill he handed her. The lights blurred. The people in the room became shapes. The night dissolved. The next thing she remembered was waking up alone, disoriented, her body sore, her mind blank. There were bruises she didn't remember getting. Her phone buzzed with a message from him. "You were amazing, I'm proud." No apology, no check-in, just ownership. She didn't reply. That afternoon, she stepped onto the red carpet, the world watching. She smiled for the cameras, posed for flashing lights, did interviews with grace. No one could see the marks beneath her dress. No one could guess the trauma she had woken up to just hours earlier. To them, she was radiant, composed, successful, only she knew the price she had paid. This wasn't just a story of private abuse, it was a collision of public glamour and hidden horror. A reminder that fame doesn't shield you from control. If anything, it can deepen the trap. Because everyone assumes you're living the dream. But in that hotel room, the illusion shattered. It was no longer about jealousy or drama. It was domination, meticulously planned and documented. He wanted to break me before the biggest moment of my life, she said, so I wouldn't believe I got there on my own. The courtroom sat in stunned silence. The event had long been rumored, but hearing it in her words turned speculation into fact. The Intercontinental wasn't just a hotel, it was the site of erasure. where Cassie's autonomy vanished for a night and her silence began to crack forever. In the years that followed, Cassie disappeared from headlines, but not from herself. She described them as quiet years filled with noise therapy sessions layered with denial, repressed memories surfacing at inconvenient hours, triggers in songs and scents, in the way certain hotel lobbies smelled. Healing was non-linear. I didn't remember everything. Right away, she said, it came in pieces. Dreams, panic attacks, gaps that suddenly made sense. She never wanted to make it public. For a long time, the idea of going up against a man with so much money, reach, and loyalty seemed impossible. But something shifted. She wanted a record, not revenge. It wasn't about money. She told the court it was about history, about making sure no one could pretend it didn't happen. That lawsuit, once filed, became a crack in the dam. Other women reached out anonymous. Complaints surfaced. Rumors that had lived only in back rooms and industry whispers suddenly had weight. Then came the FBI raid. Authorities stormed his properties. Evidence was taken, some sealed, some still unknown. For the first time, the myth of untouchability surrounding him began to crumble. When asked what she hoped would come from all of this, Cassie didn't pause. Accountability, she said, not just for me, for the others. For everyone who disappeared into those tunnels and never came back. She looked. Up steady and unshaken, I got out, but I wasn't the only one in there. Cassie Ventura didn't just recount trauma, she detonated a silence that had loomed over the industry for years in a courtroom. Filled with legal teams, press, and uneasy glances, she spoke plainly without theatrics and tore open a world hidden in plain sight, a world masked by luxury fame and carefully curated public images. For decades, rumors had danced around Diddy's orbit, strange whispers, odd stories, sudden disappearance, but no one ever stood still long enough to say it out loud. Until Cassie did. On day 5, something irreversible happened. She didn't just accuse, she documented, she detailed. She didn't speak in metaphors or suggestive hints. She was named, described, remembered. Whether or not there's a conviction, the damage to the myth is permanent. The courtroom for a moment became a mirror, forcing the world to look at what it usually scrolls past. Fame doesn't erase violence, money doesn't equal morality. Silence doesn't mean safety, it often signals control. Cassie's story isn't isolated. It's a door cracked open, and now that it is, the question isn't just about one man. It's about how many others stood nearby, how many looked away, how many more voices are waiting for the courage or the moment to step forward. The tunnels beneath. Power are rarely mapped, but once someone lights a match, they can't go dark again.